Being a dungeon master can be completely overwhelming, especially if you've only been playing for a few months. Your friends just elect you for some reason to become the next dungeon master, and you don't really know what you're doing. That's exactly what happened with me, and in the 5 years that I've been playing D&D, I've learned so many things. Hopefully, you can learn from my mistakes. My first tip is that the rules don't matter, but you have to be consistent with the rules. Part of the charm of tabletop RPGs is that you don't really have to follow the rules as written, or the RAW or the raw rules, the way many people call it online. Whatever you say goes. Want to take a potion as a bonus action instead of a main action? Okay, go for it. Push the limits and do something that your character normally wouldn't be able to do, and you allow it, then it happens. If the players have those rules, then the enemies do too. Tip number 2 is to start with what you're interested in. If you want to run a homebrew campaign, there's so many things to do. So what I like to do is to start small and then grow super large. Let's say, for example, there's say like a king and a bunch of council members. I would have to think, oh, okay, so first I have to describe the king, then I have to describe who are these people alongside of the king, what are they influencing, what are their motivations. Once you've gone on these rabbit holes for long enough, you realize that you have a ton of content that can be expanded on during your campaign. You don't need to answer all of these right away. Some of these will probably be answered as the game goes on, or maybe you have inspiration in the future. Build on whatever's necessary and take it from there. Tip number 3 is to not worry about being original. Everybody wants to blow their players' minds of how well crafted a story can be. It's a huge order in the modern world when you have things such as the internet and books and movies and video games and all of these other theaters of art. There is no such thing as an original idea anymore. There's a lot of ideas that are in the similar vein, but they're each told a little bit differently. In my experiences, the best ideas are the ones that are stolen and you twist it a little bit to fit your players. Take that for what you will. Don't worry about being original. Steal more ideas and you will have infinite number of adventure ideas for your campaigns. Tip number 4, and speaking of players, listen to your players. D&D is at its best when your player characters are collaborating. If they want to have backstories, maybe you can reward them for including one by including elements of that backstory into your adventure. Then you can twist their arm a bit, giving them some sort of tragedy. Tip number 5 is to decide what game you're making. And this is really to narrow down the possibilities what you are trying to run. Are you running a one-shot? Are you running a homebrew campaign? Are you running a pre-made module? Something a bit more railroaded or maybe a bit more sandbox? Are you running like a meme campaign where things are mostly lighthearted and it's a joke? Or are you running a gritty campaign, a dark high fantasy game? So now since you decided what game you run, you want to pitch the campaign to your players. Similar to the vein of movie trailers to movies or game trailers to games, it gives your players a clear visual of what they should be expecting. Some people call this a session 0, but depending on how well you know your players, it doesn't have to be like this formal. But all that I did was write 3 to 5 campaign ideas or campaign starts into a Google Doc. So tip number 7 is to create engaging NPCs. They just have to be engaging in the way that they approach the players, they like the players, they may hate the players, they provoke some sort of reaction from the players instead of this transactional social exchange. So tip number 8 is to create random encounters. It sounds like an obvious answer, but the way that you sell a travel sequence or a massive world is to put more content in that world, right? You know, common sense. So there's a lot of tables out there in the Dungeon Master's Guide, in Reddit, that you can draw inspiration from. So I would try to stick with whatever weird ideas that you come up with. My players usually enjoy that. So number 9 is to create strong villains. It is hard to get your players to care about someone that they don't know about. On the other hand, you want to create these strong villains because every great story has a very complicated villain that are challenging the players. For me, whenever I'm trying to come up with a villain, you have to come up with their motivations. Then you can see, oh, which of these operations can my players walk into? And once they walk into those scenarios and know more about a villain, how can they deal with it. That's how to make a strong villain. That's how I make strong villains. Hopefully I can make more in the future and get back to you on that one. So tip number 10 is to write a compelling story outline. I emphasize on the outline portion because your players will surprise you. But if you write an outline, then you can take those bullet points and then slot it into whatever situation your players are in. I like to keep it simple. I have like an exposition, I have a rising action, I have the climax, a foreseen falling action, and kind of like a transition or exposition. More on that in a future video.